The Joint Budget Committee, they've been doing these hearings, and they go over individual departments' budget. So yesterday morning, so after we got off the air yesterday, they had the meeting, and they were going over the Department of Health, and there was a lot of great questions by some great legislators, and they kept wondering why in the world are some of these agencies requesting, in some cases, $30 million when they admit they're only going to need 15. So why in the world, or 16? I mean, and so eventually there was a motion made by first State Representative Deanne Vaught to reduce the appropriation. Then later a larger reduction. State Representative Jim Dotson made that motion as well. We're going to start with State Representative Jim Dotson here. This was about an hour and 31 minutes into the budget meeting, and he has a few questions for no, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the wrong one. We're going to start with Jim Dotson around 45 minutes in. So around that mark, 45 minutes, State Representative Jim Dotson starts to question some of these Department of Health bureaucrats. This is what it sounded like.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is back to the page 85, the trauma system expenses line item. We were talking about, a second ago, with how you're asking for 10.1 million more than what you spent last year. And if I heard you correctly, you said you plan to spend all you get. How much do you realistically expect to get in the next year?
Ann will go ahead and address that one.
Thank you, because really what we're doing is trying to spin down that carry forward. And so what we're trying to do also, and that's that $8.2 million, so that's kind of why we need that additional appropriation, because we'll get the money that we need to pass through for the trauma system to the hospitals.
How much is that?
That's approximately $19 million. And so what you'll see that what we're going to do is we're very conservative in how we use this money. And so what we're hoping to have accomplished is to carry the stroke and STEMI program for the next 4 to 5 years. And to actually be able, because right now we're concentrating in southeast Arkansas, and so that education component, we want to have that statewide, and that just takes us time to do it.
So if I heard you correctly just now, you said you'll get $19 million.
That we pass through to the hospitals.
Okay. And of the 8.4 million that is carryover, how much of that are you planning to spend in the trauma system expenses line item?
I will have to give you a spreadsheet on that. I think what we did is we kind of, because that's such an important program, the majority of that money is going for that effort. So I could spread it out for as long as possible. But I think that they're maintaining maybe some of it's to stop the bleed and some of these other activities. Some of the carry forward, maybe $750,000 of that carry forward is going to be used for that purpose, those kind of purposes. And there's an education component and also some equipment purchases out of that carry forward.
So out of the 24 million in appropriation, how much, when we come back in the fall, you'll say, we spent this much of it, more than 14.1. There'll be a new number in that spot. What will that number be, approximately?
I would say our carry forward number should go down about $1 million to $1.5 million, depending on what type of activity we can get geared up for that point in time.
So you plan to spend 20 million?
Right, maybe a little bit more than that, but I'll get all that pulled together. It all depends because we are in reimbursement, and so if a hospital hasn't been able to hire that neurosurgeon or whatever they have to do to get reimbursed for that activity, that we also get savings that way as well. So that number could be, I don't want to commit to a number, then when I come back I say something different. That's part of it, is we are just reimbursed for expenses that pass through, so there could be some savings there that then rolls up into a carry forward.
So you don't expect to spend more than 21 or 22 million?
Right, right.
Okay. So 22 million will cover all of your expenses in that line item for the next year?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, stop. Okay, so this is the first example, okay, and I wanted you to hear the process. Do you understand? Maybe just listening to that, did that frustrate anybody out there? Back home, in the real world. See, that's the Marble Palace bubble. What you just heard there, did that frustrate anybody? Just to listen to that process. It's like, well, I have to get you this, I have to get you that. Well, maybe $1 million more. Next up, okay, fast forward to State Representative. Who do we have next? Fran Cavanaugh. State Representative Fran Cavanaugh did a really good job of getting these folks to admit what they are actually, how much they actually need versus how much they're asking for. Listen to this.
Representative Kavanaugh, you're up again.
Mr. Chair, I want to go to page 81 this time. There's three expenses, or three areas I want to talk about: operating expenses, professional fees, and breast care program. On professional fees, we've got an increase overspend of $20.5 million. So we spent $12 million, you're asking for $32.5 million. What is included in those professional fees and why such an increase?
Stop for a second. Pause. Did you hear what she said? You're asking for $35 million, but you only spent $12 million. What's going on? Keep going.
I'm going to have Ann give you some details on that.
Representative, the nature of the health department, we have a lot of professional fees and services that come out, whether it'll be something like a new system that was going to be deployed within the health department, or a lot of medical care that we actually contract for that out. And so our professional fees have a tendency to fluctuate, and that's how we pay. Say we may get a federal program that allows us to use that line item, but we'll make it in the interim between sessions. And so what this does, it prevents us from we're able to maybe roll out that program quicker than if we had to go through a different process. So we normally have a buffer and appropriation for that purpose. But once again, it's kind of like a trend. It's one of those things that we'd have to look at to see where we are. I know that
Buffer $20 million, which is, you're more than double of what your spend is. Your ask is more than double of what your spend was. You spent $12 million, you're asking for $32.5 million. That's a big buffer.
right, we actually requested 16 million and we got 32, and I think that difference may be a little bit of OHIT.
Stop. She said that they now talking about, I asked who? I'm assuming the executive branch. They spent 12 million. They asked for 16 and they're told that they get 30? See, this doesn't make sense to people back home in the real world. I'm just telling you. Keep going here just a little bit more.
Health information technology, when we took that effort on, but our request was 16 and it was authorized at 30 million. So
I'm looking at you asked for 30. The executive was 32. That's what legislation's come back.
Okay, go ahead and stop. Again, great job, State Representative Fran Cavanaugh. See, what they're bringing to light here. Now, this eventually comes to a boil here. This whole meeting was a disaster towards the end because of the process, okay? Because you have state representatives that try to make motions to amend the executive, Asa Hutchinson's executive recommendation. This is what his recommendation is. He wants these appropriations to go forward as is. And you have State Representative Deanne Vaught, Jim Dotson. They make a motion to reduce spending, I think by like $23 million, and it sends everybody into a tizzy. Okay? Let's actually go to next cut, State Representative Deanne Vaught. She's up next.
Representative Vaught. Let me hear your motion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Wait. I think you guys should go. Thank you for coming. I appreciate your help. Hang on. Y'all are out of here. Thank you.
All right, go ahead and stop right there. So I think we're going to have some dead air there. I'm remembering my cut list. So Deanne Vaught, she makes a motion to essentially cut like $3 million, right? And then you have Jim Dotson comes back and he makes a motion and adds on to her motion and says, we need to cut more than that, like, something like $23 million, right? Well, so go to the next one. Go to here's Democrat Joyce Elliott and Democrat Linda Chesterfield. Democrats standing up for Asa Hutchinson's executive recommendation, standing up for Asa Hutchinson's spending and appropriation, and they're going to say, Paul, it's appropriation. It's not spending. It's appropriations. It's the same thing, okay? To any normal person, it's the same thing. You're dealing with our money. Here are the Democrats standing up for the governor's power and against their own legislative oversight. Listen.
I just
Joyce Elliott.
want to remind us that we went through this whole process in depth in the regular session where we should have gone through the process and had all these discussions. And just a reminder that the point of this fiscal session is simply to do a review to see if there's anything very untoward or something that is pressing for us to have to make changes. And we're making changes here based on appropriations. And I just would like us not to be in a position, unless there is some compelling reason to do so, to change in a few days what we took an entire session to make sure we put in place. And
don't use your legislative power.
There's something to be said for remembering the point of the fiscal session. And it's not to come in here and by minute issue redo the budget.
Stop
That
for a
is
second.
why
Democrat Joyce Elliott, and I'm sure Asa Hutchinson would agree with her, and establishment Republicans would agree. They're saying the point of the fiscal session is to not come in here and find the minutia and save money. That's what she just said. That's what she just said. We're going to pick things up on the other side of the break. It's Johnny Cash Friday. I'm telling you this, it was a complete disaster. Wait until you hear. There were not enough senators on the Joint Budget Committee. You got House members, you got Senate members. There were not enough senators there to pass anything on a roll call vote. And so they didn't have enough to pass the governor's budget on a roll call. They didn't have enough to amend the governor's budget on a roll call and make it more conservative. So eventually, they just want to get out of there, and so they say, all right, we'll just pass it on a voice vote. And the no's were clearly louder, by the way, than the nays to pass it, just so they can get out of there and not do their jobs. I'm telling you, the whole process was revealed once again to just be, it's like a kangaroo court. I mean, it's embarrassing. If you have any concept of what your definition of good government is, we got to go. Johnny Cash Friday. Conduit News Radio, I'm Paul Harrell. All right, so we're going over this audio budget hearings yesterday. Complete disaster. The process, it's not about you folks. I'm telling you this. It's not about our interests that are being served here. It's really not. All right, so let's pick back up here. We have the Democrats, Senator Joyce Elliott and Linda Chesterfield, actually standing up against making conservative changes, standing up for ACE's executive recommendation, which is, in some cases giving agencies that are requesting, they say they need $16 million, and now they're being approved to spend $30 million. Go ahead.
The motion that I did, because we are doing what we should do come 2019. And I would just ask you to take that into consideration. So that
now,
we can move on.
this is in response to a motion that was made to reduce the spending, the appropriation.
At the proper time, when the question comes, I'd like to have a division of the House.
Okay, that's appropriate.
And while I have the mic, speaking in opposition, one of my colleagues said this is like an empty bucket. You don't necessarily have to fill it up, but if you don't have the bucket, you certainly cannot. That's what's troubling, is that issues arise. You have to have an appropriation in place. If you don't have the appropriation in place, then we've got to come back and deal with all of this again. We've had epidemics that have broken out that we could not have anticipated.
Oh, yeah.
But if we don't have the monies in place, or not the money, this is not money. This is saying, this is an appropriation.
It's authority to spend money. It's the same
If we
thing.
get the money, that's one thing. But if we don't have an appropriation in place, we simply cannot meet those crises that arise.
Okay, so they're speaking in opposition. The Democrats speaking in opposition of conservative Jim Dotson, who's saying, look, I think we need to, and Deanne Vaught and others who are pointing out, Fran Kavanaugh pointing out, if you spent $12 million and they asked for 16 but were approved for 30. I just don't think we need to give them that kind of spending authority if they have it. If the money is there. That's all they're trying to do. Next up, you have State Representative Kim Hendren, because there's a motion that's made shortly after this. There's discussion, then there's a motion that's made for immediate consideration, which means that Jim Dotson won't be allowed to close on his original motion. And this is what happened. Listen to this.
Says when a person's labor is due, you ought to pay it. Now, my question is, when Kevin gets this figure, and as I understand it, Kevin, they're not asking to cut anybody's expense out here because we're still above what they spent. But what we're saying, change, how much is that figure?
Yes, sir. This is just to change spending authority. It is not changing actual funding, and it is at $23.5 million.
So there's $23.5 million. And my question, Duncan, if we were to do this, can we take part of that? Can this group, and along with the executive, can we take part of that money, pay these people the money that we owe them on payday, and also, somebody said no.
Senator Henry, you know it's not money. It's appropriation.
You know what, I don't believe that, I don't buy that, and I'm not going back to Northwest Arkansas selling that stuff. I don't believe that. That's what, and matter of fact, I just got something here. I just got this thing out I asked for a while ago. And Chairman, you said yesterday, this is not in.
Okay, stop. So that actually was Kim Hendren, not on the motion, but on the idea of they're saying, appropriations are not money. Appropriations are not money. And there's a from the elites down there yesterday, folks, they were so condescending. Anybody that tried to say that that what they were doing, appropriating, giving each agency authority to spend up to this amount, they're like, it's not money, it's not money, it's not money. It is if the money is there, and that's the point. And the elitist attitude down there yesterday was absolutely thick for people that think that they know the budget process. No, you don't so much know the budget process. You just know the status quo, and the status quo is not representing us. I'll be back with more of this audio breaking it down, what happened yesterday down at the Marble Palace. 22 that was yesterday's budget hearing, exposing just a really flawed process. Hopefully in the next this segment you will understand what I'm talking about here. Let's first pick up, this is State Representative Douglas House speaking on the motion that was made by State Representative Jim Dotson to actually cut the appropriation authority, spending authority that was going to be given to Department of Health. I think it was like $23 million. Listen to this.
That was my question.
Okay. Representative House.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since I've heard at least two people say they don't understand what's going on, I'll just make the statement. Three people that say they don't understand what's going on. I'll make the statement I am going to vote for Representative Dotson's amended motion, which basically piggybacks onto the amended motion previous to that. It cuts the authority to spend money. They're saying, okay, last year we spent X number of dollars, but this year we want permission to spend X plus Y if we get Y. We are saying, no, if you get some extra money, you don't get to spend it on what you want to. We will decide as a body where that money needs to be spent, not carte blanche to spend it on that particular program. For instance, smoking cessation. Representative Lowry had a real good example. Representative Douglas had another good example with the county operations. That money many times can be moved to more t-shirts if that's going to stop people from smoking, or it can be moved to county operations where they can deal with making sure everybody in the community is vaccinated or not, or hiring temporary help. But by not cutting it, we're telling the health department, you can spend this money up to a gazillion dollars, X plus Y plus Z, which is really our authority to tell them we want it spent on county operations.
To tell them no.
We're taking away the discretion that they have to spend any extra money they might get on those particular programs.
Should not stop.
And the questions that were
and to all of you big government Republican senators, that should not be a complicated issue. That shouldn't be a controversial issue to do. trying to weaken state agencies. That's what this was about, trying to weaken state agencies and giving them less authority. You had the opportunity to do that yesterday, and there wasn't enough senators that would show up, okay, that actually were there, and so they actually couldn't pass anything. They couldn't, on a recorded vote, they couldn't pass the governor's budget. They couldn't pass the amended budget. So they eventually, here in a minute, we'll see, they just do a voice vote so they can get out of there. Okay, so Douglas House here making some really good points. Okay, let's go to the next. Cut, Joe. Then we have here's the actual motion. Okay, there was a motion made for immediate consideration of Jim Dotson's conservative motion to basically reduce the appropriations, the spending authority for these agencies. Well, so Jim Dotson should have gotten to close for that. And somebody made a motion for immediate consideration, which would say State Representative Jim Dotson can't close for his motion. And this made State Representative Kim Hendren unhappy. So at 124.34, Joe, hit it. Yeah, it's the one right after. It's the one. Okay, yeah. No, one. Yeah, I'm sorry. State Representative Kim Hendren, 124.34 is where we want to go.
The rest of them are exec rec.
Okay. Representative Hendren, you have a question about the process, or?
Yes, I do.
What's your question?
Mike, yes, I do, Mr. Chairman. As a member of this body, I want to know if I can appeal the ruling of the chair. And the reason I say that is the chair just told one of our colleagues that he or she, whoever it was, could be allowed to close. Then we come along here later and change the rules. Mr. Chairman, that's wrong, and I would appeal the chair. Let Representative Dodson make his close as the chair committed that he wouldn't be allowed to do.
I did commit that, but the motion overrode that when it said immediate consideration.
But this body can overrule your ruling, too.
I agree with that.
So I move that we allow Representative Dodson to make his close.
The body voted for the motion.
Beg your pardon?
The body voted for the motion, and that was the decision.
But don't I have a right to make another motion to overrule the
Not till we finish this motion. Thank you, Representative. Let's hear your point of order.
We can't appeal your ruling on the call of the voice vote, and that's what he's indicating. He said he wants to appeal the decision of the chair of the voice vote on the immediate consideration, and I would second that motion.
All right, stop. I'm not sure who that is. I don't have that because I just have the audio here. So there's another representative saying actually what Representative Hendren is saying here is you guys made the motion for immediate consideration. It was a voice vote, and we need a roll call vote to actually make sure that there's enough people that want to just go ahead and Johnny sweep the legs out from Jim Dotson and not let him close for his bill. Okay, here. So eventually, we'll keep going. Senator Larry Teague, the chair of the budget, says this.
And then a roll call.
They want a roll call vote. Uh-oh. Watch out.
So really, I think it's too late for that, but I'm going to allow it just for the sake of getting this put to bed.
Okay.
So
all right,
I need
stop.
3 hands.
So they allow the roll call on a very just trivial motion of immediate consideration. Now I know I'm getting into the weeds here, folks, but you got to understand this. Okay, this is integral to us getting a government that we actually that represents us. Okay, so Kim Hendren basically started kind of a little avalanche here. This is where it all kind of starts to go off of the rails. Go to the next one here. This is the motion for immediate consideration, the roll call vote. I'm not going to bore you with them calling out everybody's name. Go for it, Joe.
For immediate. So we are going to do immediate consideration. No, we're not going to do. That's right. I'm confused.
It failed.
Now we're going back to discussion.
So stop. So stop right there. So it failed. So what Kim Hendren did actually made him do a roll call, and it failed. It didn't pass, which means that these stupid voice votes disenfranchise the entire political process, just leaving it up to the chairman to decide what he hears. Keep going, because now Jim Dotson is next here.
We now have Representative Dotson. Are you ready? I think does anybody feel like they need to talk before Representative Dotson closes? Representative Dotson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members. I think it's important to keep in mind as we're looking at this,
Jim Dotson.
This is the reason that we're here, budget hearings, if not for the purpose of going through, sharpening our pencil and looking at the budget. That's our legislative role and responsibility is asking the questions, but if we don't ever make any changes to the numbers that were presented, why are we here? And so, as far as the budgeting process is concerned, we've asked questions of the agency, and the motion that I've made and Representative Bott's made has been based largely off the testimony of the agency in front of us. And so if you'll go through the motion, or I'll go through the motion line by line here as briefly as possible. One other thing to keep in mind is that this is to draft the appropriation for the fiscal session. This doesn't do anything as far as what we're voting on during the session. We still have to go through the entire budget process during the fiscal session itself. So this is just a starting point. We'll still have amendments if the agency comes back and says that, or the governor sends a letter saying, hey, we need to increase the appropriation in this line item or this line item. All of that can happen during the fiscal session, and I'm sure it will in many instances. Hopefully not in these particular areas, but we'll see. I'll be more than happy to work with the governor's office. But the bottom line is this does not change one penny of spending, only the authority to spend. So on page 81, under operating expenses, the reason that I moved to reduce the appropriation level from 82 million down to 79 million is that last year they only spent 68. The agency sat there and testified that they only needed an additional $10 million worth of appropriation authority. So gave them $10 million plus an extra million, so they'll have $79 million or $11 million more than they spent last year in that line item. Lots of cushion. Under professional fees line item, they spent $12 million last year. My motion is for $17 million in that line item. A lot of cushion. They're asking for 32. But 17 is still $5 million more in cushion than 12.
All right, stop.
On page 85.
So he does a great job, State Representative Jim Dotson. Matter of fact, on Facebook right now, listening at facebook.com/Conduit News, State Representative Brant Smith just said that Representative Dotson continues to distinguish himself as a fiscal conservative. Brant Smith goes on to say, not only did several senators not show up, their alternates were not in attendance. One representative commented, we can't even cut fake money. It was a horrible example of not doing what is right for the people of our state. That's State Representative Brant Smith on our Facebook live feed, and he's a friend of the program. This right here, I hope it sparks. I mean, folks, the Republican establishment leadership, they don't want legislators to legislate. They want you to go along to get along and just fall down at the feet of Asa Hutchinson and do exactly what he says. And any attempt to, again, just cut the authority to spend, which, if we're honest, folks, we keep getting these record revenues. It's very likely this stuff does get funded. If you want my 2 cents on the matter. So Representative Dotson closes for his motion, and they do a roll call vote, and it fails. They just simply don't have enough yes votes to get the motion out, okay? So then there's another motion. There's a motion made to just accept the executive recommendation, meaning let's just accept Governor Asa Hutchinson's wishes and let's just pass it out as is without any of the cuts. Well, guess what? There's not enough people there, again, on a roll call vote to pass anything out of the committee. So now we fast forward, again, to State Representative Douglas House, who basically says, look, we can't do anything. We're at a stalemate now. So we might as well just, what they do is just do a voice vote, which is clearly they didn't have the votes to pass it, but they just do a voice vote and rubber stamp it. Here's Representative Douglas House. Once they reach this stalemate, and they don't have the votes to pass a motion to cut or to pass a motion as is, this is what Representative Douglas House said.
Representative House.
Is it time for discussion on the motion?
Yes, sir.
We're going to vote against it. Here's why. We're not going to get what we want because you don't have enough votes on the Senate side. It's time to pass a motion out at all to get the bill drafted. I accept defeat on this point, which is the majority of people in here are trying to cut the budget. There are not enough votes to cut the budget, therefore I'm going to vote for executive rec, in which case the budget gets drafted and we'll fight this battle another day. That's
Amen,
why
brother.
we'll vote against it. And let's move on because it's,
All right,
Thank you.
so Doug House
Thank you,
says, look,
Representative.
okay, at this point, he was for the motion to cut, but now we don't have the votes to cut, and so let's just fight the battle another day. That's what he says. In reality, if you don't have the votes, in my opinion, I mean, I know it takes time. I know you guys got other, you got other stuff to move on to, but if you don't have enough people in the room to do a recorded vote and pass something, then hey, I think that's the people saying stop. I don't care about the process. Okay, there's a reason that we have a representative government. That's my 2 cents on the matter. Fast forwarding now, State Representative Kim Hendren. Again, very, very, you're never going to say that Kim Hendren is ambiguous. He always tells you what he thinks, and he does not appreciate what's going on yesterday. Again, it was a disaster. Listen to Kim Hendren.
Anything down there at the desk that maybe, anyway, I guess my point about this whole deal is that I don't see the problem in this body here when we're 135 representatives of the state of Arkansas. And we gather together down here, they pay us per diem, they pay us mileage, and to come in here and expect us to just rubber stamp whoever it is, whether it's my bill or Duncan Baird's bill or anybody else. And then I just see and it really bothers me. And then we hurry through here, we've got to go do something, and I think we ought to move education up here so we don't get caught in a snowstorm going home this afternoon or whatever. But it just bothers me, and I don't think it's good government. I don't think it's moving the right direction when we, as colleagues here, tend to disrespect our colleagues when they disagree with us, when they want to do something and fix something.
So, are you speaking for or against the motion?
I'm not speaking at all since you turned my light off.
Punch it back up.
All right, stop.
Punch it, yell.
So anyway, it's just not good government. And so to kind of capping things off here, Joe, the last cut, 156.11. Here it is. They were at a stalemate, and so instead of just leaving things as they were at a stalemate, we get this we get this exercise in democracy.
Okay, it just saves staff some work, but it'll be fine. All right, so the motion is that we do legislative rec. Is that right? All right, we haven't split the vote. All those in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed? No. The ayes have it. All right, members, thank you for your work. We'll be back in one.
And there you go. That is what happened. They passed ACE's wishes on a voice vote, and you heard it there. At the very least, it was even split yeses and nos, but there wasn't actually even a quorum of senators there to do what they were supposed to do. Wasn't a quorum of senators. So, that's certainly interesting. I'm Paul Harrell, Arkansas. Be safe.